Hello and welcome to Japan Expert Insights and our Wednesday morning room with Tim Sullivan and me, Maya Matsuoka, as your hosts and moderators. In this podcast, we welcome comments, questions, and opinions. So if you haven't done so yet, join us next time on Clubhouse. In the meantime, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific region. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today we have a very special guest, Kyota Ko, and he's a storyteller. So as you have seen from the title of this room, we're going to talk about appreciating Japanese culture through stories. And Kyoto has been really great at doing this, at letting us appreciate the culture through his stories on LinkedIn and his podcasts as well. So Kyoto, thank you very much for coming. I'm not going to hold anybody, just waiting for you to talk. So let's start. And of course, on the way, we'll chime in with comments and questions. We'll open the room to discussion. Well, that's it from me for the moment. And so let's start.
All right. Let's see. So thank you for the introduction. I recently came to be called or labeled like storyteller. I never thought I would be called that way until quite recently. I started posting things that I thought was interesting about Japanese culture. Mainly I wrote about different aspects of Japanese culture. I started reading about Japan from different perspectives, from food to history and traditions, of course, festivals, and how this all came. And I got interested in how this all came to be. So this was part of a project, actually, I was assigned to at my full-time job, which I still do. But the project that then was to start up an online business Japanese school. And my assignment was to decide on the concept and the curriculum, basically. And the goal was to help business people who want to or are interested in working in Japan learn the communication and the mindset they would need to do well in business in Japan. So in order to write the curriculum, write the materials there, I thought, I need to understand Japanese culture myself, and that's how I started. And I am kind of finished with that project. I've handed over to someone else, but my personal project in studying Japanese culture has continued now for like 3 or 4 years now, and I was posting on Instagram like every day for a year and a half. Now it's like most of the week, but I still do it now, and I started getting traction from people who are interested in Japanese culture. And then one day, I think about when I was like a year and a half into this everyday cycle, some people at Instagram started saying, I think, don't you have a book? And do you have a book? So I started saying, no, I don't, but maybe I should write something now that you mentioned it. So that's how I started writing a book. And in half a year, I wrote this book, which I'll introduce later. But it's Folktales of Japan. That's the title. Folktales of Japan, 28 Japanese folktales with cultural commentary. So it's not that I am like a fanatic of Japanese folktales. I do make my son watch one episode. There's like a video series of it in Japan. It was like running for like 20 years. So there's a lot of stories on YouTube. So I show one to him every night, and he enjoys it too. I enjoy it too. But I realized folktales are one way to appreciate Japanese culture. That's an obvious thing to say, but the way we appreciate these Japanese folktales is, well, basically these tales were made through a course of a long time, and they've streamlined the stories in the most minimalist but most effective way of telling moral or usually there's a moral. Usually there's a moral, but sometimes it's just horror. But it's those stories are tailored into a format that um, convey the message or the emotional effect Japanese culture, Japanese society wanted to convey in the most efficient way. So I thought that's a good starting point to write. And I coupled these 28 folktales with a historical episode or a cultural commentary that seemed fit. So I'm using these folktales as a hook for people to read about Japanese history and get interested in those topics. So it's not like stories are like the next iPhone. It's like you need it, you want it. It's not like that. But trying to comprehend the culture I live in through stories and folk tales, not just folk tales, but historical tales, have actually helped me attain happiness from a state where I wasn't happy. So I think I'm going to talk about that first. Well, I understand now that people in Japan, people who live in Japan, either whether you're Japanese local or non-Japanese local, doesn't matter. People in Japan largely seem to live in either one of these two places. It's like one is a rather hellish Japan, where people live under millions of rules or unspoken rules, etiquettes, mannerisms, and social expectations, large social expectations, lots of them. The other place is a rather heavenly Japan, where people live above those rules, unspoken rules, and social expectations and everything. It's as if there are two parallel Japans, like two parallel universes, two Japaniverses. And until quite recently, a couple of years ago, I lived in the former hellish Japan that kind of suffocates you and humiliates you and nags at you, and you eventually start to feel like killing myself might be the best option. So I get on the train, and still now I see more or less half of the passengers in the same car look like they too consider death as a potential solution to their problems. So, and that's not good. But as a matter of fact, many Japanese locals live in that Japan, which is sad. And this has a lot to do with them not understanding their own culture. So let me talk about that first. So they have to, for example, how is this suffocating them? So they have to get in line at the train station in the morning, in the way these tapes stuck on the ground tell you, so that it's fair for everyone, right? And they have to carry their backpacks in front of them when they get on the rush hour train, so that they can make space for other passengers. They're called backpacks, but who knew that you should carry it in front of you, right? And then they have to remember to receive business cards with both hands, so that it looks like you are treating the business card like the counterpart himself. So all these things, like the smallest things, are choreographed and ritualized, like how you're supposed to hold chopsticks, or rather the 40 ways you're not supposed to use chopsticks, and somehow you're supposed to remember all these things. So everything is choreographed, and everything has mini taboos, and when you do something wrong, you're a target of shame. It's like, shame on you for not knowing those rituals and those choreographs. And at a slightly bigger level, Japanese media would brainwash you to think that you are among the winning group if you're 35 and you have an income greater than this much. And you're among the losers if you don't. If you're 28, you're supposed to have savings of this much, because your wedding should cost at least this much. And wedding couples this year should employ child actors who act out your childhood, so you can make your parents cry without fail. I mean, who's deciding these things? Like, who is deciding these things? But anyway, people buy into these ideas and judge people around them based on these endless criteria. And these create new unspoken rules and new social expectations and pressure. So everyone's mind is constantly worried about not meeting these expectations, that expectation, this social norm, that social norm. And so that's hellish Japan that I think most young people live in, actually. And listening to all this, I'm sure some of you are thinking, hey, that totally happens in my culture too. So maybe it's not particular to Japan. I don't think, but it does happen a lot, and it's suffocating lots of people in Japan, I think. So why do we get trapped in hellish Japan? Right? So it's simply because we take these rules and guidelines that are fed or that are bombarded onto. We take these rules and guidelines as is, at face value. But when we try to look beyond that facade and think, why did these rules, customs, and rituals come about in the first place? then you start to solve your problems. And the answer is, I believe, always the same. Why did these rules and customs and rituals come about? It's for good intentions. It's for good intentions. And that's, I believe, always the same, always the answer to every question like that. For good intentions. Like how to hold chopsticks seems like a petty thing to think about, right? And yes, exactly, it's a petty thing that shouldn't occupy a space in your creative mind. There's nothing creative about how to eat with chopsticks. You just pick up your food and bring it to your mouth, right? So that's why someone in the past figured out the most efficient and elegant way to use chopsticks for you so that you won't have to waste time trying to figure it out yourself. So if you don't know how to eat elegantly with a chopstick, and let's say you attend a dinner with the emperor, let's say, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to network with this person and to ask questions or be asked questions and have this lovely conversation with the emperor. But can you focus on your conversation with the emperor? Probably no, because you'll be worrying about getting table manners wrong and embarrassing yourself, right? So your mind is preoccupied with how to hold a chopstick, how not to drop food, how to elegantly eat, how not to mess it up. So to enjoy the meal fully, you should learn the predetermined rules of chopsticks through repeated practice. You do it over and over and over and over until you don't need to think to do it anymore. So the most elegant mannerisms become second nature to you that way. And there you go. So you have freed your mind from worrying about meeting social norms by conquering them. So making them a natural part of you is the key. So if you've experienced tea ceremony, which I haven't properly, but I think some of you have, I think it's basically the same idea. You go through a predetermined choreography over and over and over, and you think, where's the fun? What's the fun in doing everything that's predetermined? But I believe this is why tea ceremony is thought to be the epitome of Japanese culture. You conquer these petty things that actually boggle your mind through repeated practice. So it is an epitome of Japanese culture. So my point is, these rules and guidelines and pretty much everything we do or see around us were made for good intentions once upon a time. They were made to let you free your mind from petty things so you can use your mind to do great things, to do more important things, like thinking of ways to be hospitable to a special guest, right? That's Japanese culture. And if you're familiar with the idea of Kaizen, Toyota's Kaizen philosophy, it's the same thing. So I was struck by this idea when I read for the first time that Kaizen, it's not, the goal is not to greater things. The goal is to slack off. The goal is to find ways to streamline the not so important tasks or parts of the workflow so that you can spend more time thinking about how to improve things or spend more time on the more important tasks. So it's basically to work less. Kaizen is the philosophy to work less. And I think it's very, very, it has a similarity with this idea of what the tea ceremony and Japanese culture is built upon good intentions. So, so just to show like you in a real life example, a modern life example, it's a very petty thing that I just noticed a few weeks ago. So a few weeks ago in Japan, it's in August, right? So it was scorching hot here in Tokyo, and you could feel your skin being burnt. So the sun was merciless that day, and I noticed at all. So I work in this business district called Kanda. There's a big intersection, and there are like how many like 6 lanes on each road. So it's a big intersection, and there are a few trees planted at each of the 4 corners of the intersection. And you think, so what, right? But again, it's scorching hot, and I noticed at all 4 corners there were people waiting for the traffic signal to change, which is not surprising. And the wait is pretty long; it's like 2 minutes. So at every corner, people were waiting under the shade created by the trees. And it finally occurred to me, commuting to this same office for 4 years, it finally occurred to me that perhaps someone in the past, like 50 or 60 years ago, thought, let's plant trees at every corner because otherwise people are going to have to wait for 2 minutes in the sun for the traffic light to change. And let's if you're going to do it, let's plant ginkgo trees so that this ugly concrete intersection will look nice, at least in autumn. And the trees turn yellow in autumn, and they motivate me slightly to come to work during those 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So when you start thinking that everything is made from a good intention by a person sometime in the past, you cannot help but feel grateful about living in such a beautiful world. And I feel that is happiness. So that's just an introduction of why I'm continuing this ritual of writing stories almost daily on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. So that being said, I'd like to explore the background of something we all like, Japanese gardens. I don't know if you have like a. You want to say something, or it's okay?
No, I was applauding you in Clubhouse manners.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. It's like
Yes.
Newton on me. Really? That's okay. This is my very first time talking at Clubhouse room, so I'm learning something new.
Just,
Thank you.
Chota, I just want to make just a couple of quick comments. First
Yeah.
of all, I think that is about the most nuanced and honest social commentary I've heard about Japan. So thank you for that. I mean, it's a really interesting point of view. And then just the other, you're talking about all these, these daily rituals. And, it's the power of ritual, right? And it's funny you talked about Kaizen, because I was thinking, as an old manufacturing guy, we always were striving to automate repetitive behavior, and just take it out of the equation if we could, or as you said, streamline it, right? So that's actually the Kaizen angle is good. But anyway, thank you. I just wanted to say that, and I will let you continue.
Yeah, exactly. So the Kaizen activity is like, yeah, everyone does it. It's not anything special. It's something everyone does through eating with chopsticks every day. So yeah, it is like rooted very deeply in everything we do in Japan, we see in Japan. Of course, it's not just in Japan, I don't think. There are many rituals that many cultures repeat every day for centuries, and that becomes culture, basically. So yeah, I find this very, very interesting. And I through reading and posting, reading and posting, reading and posting for like 3 years now, I finally came to realize that myself. And living in Japan, just like blindly, mindlessly living in Japan, doesn't necessarily get you to that conclusion. So I believe that is why, sadly, there are many people who are stuck in that hellish Japan mindset. And yeah.
Yes, Kyoto, I cannot agree with you more on this because I have been there. I have done that. I mean, I lived in that Japan during the first 3 years of my life here, and it was really a struggle for me. But I appreciate, and the other day when we were talking about today, actually, I really wanted you to say exactly what you said, like how important rules and rituals are, and that behind every one of them there is an intent of making your life easier in the long term. So, and thank you very much for doing this. So, also, I always, try to tell people around me who are still in that part, in that, let's say, who are still struggling to make sense of the things, how things are happening here. Try to tell them that we do need to look deeper, not just on the surface, and not just, say, why is this like that? It doesn't make sense. And we need to find the sense behind it. So thank you very much for this. And so please continue, because I noticed that you're going to say, to continue the talk now.
But yeah, that's very interesting. That I'm pretty sure everyone who has stayed in Japan, or sorry, lived in Japan for a certain number of years, notice that there are people, right, like just as Maya just said, are stuck in that mindset, and right, and Japan is supposed to be one of the most livable places in the world, and to them, it seems like it's the reverse, exact opposite. The people want to kill themselves, and instead of like jumping on a train, they jump in front of a train. So right. Oh, wait, I think Michael has something to say. I wonder if you can say the same thing about the shade for people in the trees in Kanda as you can say for the trees and the deer in Narakoen. Actually, I was in Nara just last month, and I was being chased by deer because I was holding a shikasenbei, these deer crackers. I don't know if
That's
any of you.
hilarious.
Yes,
they're
they
quite
sell those crackers even in I think the convenience stores around the park, right?
right.
So
Yes.
yeah.
Right. So those deer, they park in front of the convenience stores, and then the moment you buy it, they flock on you, and then I had to run like half a kilometer to and jump over a river so that I could I could leave behind
Escape.
9 out of 10 of them. One of them just kept chasing me, but and then Narakoen, yeah. Actually, I read that those deer in Narakoen, they have been there for 1,000 years at least. So the earliest record of Japanese history, it's more like mythology, but the formally accepted, approved Japanese record of Japanese history, uh, deers are there, and people were not hurting them. People were thinking they're sacred animals in Nara. So, of course, if you're a deer born in some other part of the country, then you get shot. But if you're born in Nara, you're treated nicely, just as they are right now. I don't know if there's a connection there. I don't know if I can make a connection there. I'm sure there is between the good intentions behind the trees in Kanda. But I don't know. I'd like to try making a connection there. Um, you know, no, I think if I travel to Nara more often, then I think it will come to me. It will occur to me why these deers are kept as is, and yeah, the park, probably the maintenance of the park. It's for the deer, basically for the deer, but it's not just for the deer. I think now that I think about it, it's again for good intentions. Um, the presence of deer in Nara, again, it's been the same for 1,000 years. So keeping the deer in Nara happy and providing livable environment for them, and continue doing that, it helps us appreciate the fact that this culture has continued for 1,000 years. And right, lots of trees in the shade. That's right, in the shade. Yes, right. So the shade is superficially is for the deers. We plant all these trees and then reserve all this. Narako is a vast park. We reserve all this park space, which we could have developed, a commercial property there and make money out of it, but we don't. And we just keep these parks with all these shades for the deers. But it's not just for the deers; it's for the Japanese culture, Japanese society in general. That it's a reminder, it's a constant reminder for us that our history dates back 1,000 years to when once upon a time Nara was the capital of Japan. So yeah, I think that's the best I could do for now. But yes, right. The deer is a sacred Buddhist totem. I see. Right. Yeah. So killing them is like killing Buddha, which people wouldn't feel comfortable about doing. So all right. Okay, so now that we're talking about Nara Park. So I was actually in Nara in Kyoto last month, and I had to stop by Nara for a day to see to check on the deers, and they were not they were quite mean to me. But after that, I went back to Kyoto and I visited all these temples with the nicest gardens. And of course I live in Tokyo, and there are a few very very nice gardens in Tokyo, but compared to the temple gardens in Kyoto, they're really only worth consolation prizes. The temple gardens in Kyoto are out of this world. It's you can see, you can feel. You don't have to be an expert in gardening to see that the level of craftsmanship involved in Kyoto is nothing comparable to anything else around the country. So, and I'm going to tell you exactly why temple gardens in Kyoto are that beautiful today. So, through a story. So I think some to many of you, I think here, are aware of the samurai feudal lord Oda Nobunaga. It's a very famous Japanese figure in history. I often refer to him as the Elon Musk and Steve Jobs of Japanese feudal lords, because Elon Musk, because of how quickly he grew his business from being very small, and Steve Jobs, because he was an immensely successful person with anger management issues. So this was back in the Sengoku period, in the 15th and 16th centuries, when there was a samurai battle royal, so to speak, going on. Each feudal lord was invading another feudal lord's territory, and this was happening all over Japan, almost every day, except winter when it's cold. Nobunaga was the lord of a fairly small territory, but one day he announced openly, like, I'm going to conquer all of Japan. So other feudal lords were like, who's this guy, right? But in a couple of decades, yes, he actually conquered a third of Japan, and he had developed very talented generals who were assigned to each frontier, and everyone, um, every one of these generals were doing a great job, and so Nobunaga was resting with just a few of his servants and bodyguards at a temple called Honnoji Temple in Kyoto one night in 1582. But he woke up to the sound of gunfire, and soon he found out that his most trusted right-hand man, his name is Akechi Mitsuhide, so Mitsuhide, he had revolted and had come to kill him with 10,000 of his men. And as opposed to that, Nobunaga had like 30 men in Honnoji Temple. So Nobunaga seemed to have been a jerk toward his employees, and ultimately he had to pay for it. So he died there at Honnoji Temple for being a jerk to his subordinates. Now, this story is all too famous, but my favorite Japanese culture authority now, I like his books, Inoue Shoichi, who is the chief of the International Research Center for Japanese Studies, which is located in Kyoto. He raised a very interesting question in one of his books. So he asked, Nobunaga died in Honnoji, very tragic. And his body was never found, so it's a mystery where he went. Maybe he's alive, and there's all these fantasies going on. But I think we should ask. We're forgetting to ask one question: why was Nobunaga staying over at a temple? He had a second house in Kyoto, right? Why did he choose to sleep at a temple? And it's not just Honnoji Temple. Many samurai lords choose to sleep over at temples. Why? Okay, so Dr. Inoue, he goes on to say that from around the 14th century, samurai feudal lords actually started staying at temples whenever they came to Kyoto. So why? It's because temples, as you may have noticed, are always super clean, and the monks there tend to be intelligent and nice people, right? So basically, temples in Kyoto in the 15th and 16th century, starting from the 14th century, temples in Kyoto were used as hotels by feudal lords. They were hotels for feudal lords. There is no religious directive in Zen Buddhism or any other Buddhist sect to have beautiful gardens. There's nothing that forces followers, worshippers, to build beautiful gardens, but they do. So the reason temples in Kyoto developed beautiful gardens is because they had these special guests from time to time. These are samurai feudal lords who needed to think about whom to kill off next and which village to destroy next almost every day. People can't really keep doing that. They'll lose their humanity, and they need to rest their minds from those very thorny thoughts. So temples started beautifying their gardens. They wanted the feudal lords to feel peace of mind, and because they're important guests, they sometimes sponsor them. They fund their maintenance of the temple. So they would always also hone their cooking skills. I don't know if you guys are aware about shojin ryori, shojin cuisine. It's basically a vegetarian, vegan dish, vegan cuisine, where that was invented by the Japanese Buddhist community. So they can't eat meat. They can't eat meat. This is actually pretty interesting. They can't eat meat, but they miss meat. They're very honest about their desires. So they can't eat meat. So they started trying to invent ways to transform vegetables and soy into meat-like things. So that's why we have lots of kinds of dishes in oden cuisine. That's basically based off of shojin ryori. But anyway, so those shojin ryori, they came about. One reason they came about was to satisfy the inner desires of Buddhist monks, but they were sophisticated thanks to their good intentions to host these feudal lord guests and make them feel a little better about life, and take their minds off of thinking about killing people. So they would think, okay, well, how should I make this make dinner for Nobunaga-san next time he comes around? And Nobunaga-san is trying to unify all of Japan for us. If there's anything my humble Buddhist monk self can do to help him, maybe I should give him the best stay. I will give him the best stay at Honnoji. So I should create a garden that will help him forget about his everyday duties. I hope he likes it, and that's the reason Buddhist temples in Japan, they have beautiful, beautiful gardens, and over many, many years, they've continued this tradition of trying to make it better. For whom? For people who have to, think about all these mind-boggling things. And nowadays, these beautiful gardens rest the eyes and minds of corporate soldiers like us, right? And it's serving the same kind of purpose. Once for feudal lords, now for corporate soldiers. So that's just a little story that I want to share. So next time we go to Kyoto, next time I go to Kyoto, I know the story behind this. So I'm not just appreciating the aesthetics of the visual aesthetics of Japanese gardens, but also, of course, um, how it has helped people in history and how it helps people now. It has an important place in Japanese culture and our Japanese lives. So thank you, and thank you for listening to that. I just had to share that story. So.
Oh, Kyoto-san, thank you so much for sharing that interesting story and your take. I'm really intrigued, but I'm sorry, I really want to understand everything you said. So try to hang on to every single word you're uttering. But so going back, okay, so I thought that was great, like association you said, those, like a samurai and a corporate soldier of recent years. Then I'm just wondering why they don't make those, like a beautiful garden in Tokyo. Where don't they need more, like, I don't know, easing of their, the tired souls? But anyway,
Right.
yeah.
Yes,
And then I'm still going. Sorry,
yeah.
I keep interrupting. Okay. So going back to the Shojin Rori meal, what was the original intention of that? Could you repeat that? Sorry, I'm trying to understand.
Okay, yeah. So I was saying, Buddhist monks. So this is not going to be pretty, but Buddhist monks, Buddhism came into Japan probably around the 7th or 8th century, but it became the official national religion around that time. Before that, it was coming in because people from Korea and China were coming in to Japan, and they were bringing in these religions, and people were not really converting, but they were Japanese locals. They were appreciating these philosophies. But it became an official religion in Japan in around, I think, the 7th or 8th century. So intellectuals were encouraged to become Buddhists and learn the religion, and because academics equaled religion at that time. And so there are many monks converting to Buddhism. The Shintoism is a religion in hindsight, but basically it's just a way of life of people. So it's not really religion. So it's wrong for me to say they converted. But anyway, so there are Buddhist monks. There are thousands of Buddhist monks in Hiei-san, Mount Hiei, and Koyasan. There are many Buddhist sects that rose that were established by monks who traveled to China and then came back safely. But so at the beginning, of course, there were good intentions, right? Buddhism was there to save people's minds when there was a lot of famine and people were dying every day. The life expectancy was 14, 15 years old, for example, around that time. So people were trying to save the minds of people by telling them, don't worry, life is hard, but after your death, it's gonna be all good. Those kind of things. But and there were Buddhist precepts, basically rules that they have to follow. Right? Don't eat meat, or basically don't kill or living organisms, and don't drink, don't intoxicate yourself, stay away from sex, and I forgot the other two. Or don't smoke or something like that. So those were the precepts, but following all those precepts is not easy for everyone, right? I can follow. Okay, I don't have to drink, but some of these other things I want to do, like eat meat, because these are people who used to be peasants, right? They used to be farmers or samurai who lost their job, for example, and they converted to Buddhism, and they became Buddhist monks. And so, with time, at first they were like very sophisticated-minded people becoming monks, but as time went on, for tax evasion purposes, a tax was very hefty. Because the central government was not doing a good job caring about people. So tax was very heavy. So people became Buddhist monks for tax evasion. It was tax haven. So there were many monks who became monks without high aspirations, and they miss meat, they miss alcohol, they miss sex. So this is where it gets ugly. But so many Buddhist monks still want to have sex, but they're not supposed to have women at their temples, so they can't. So they have these little boys who who still have that feminine look. So they're being used. They're not, I wouldn't say slaves, but they serve for the temple. They get fed, but in the nighttime, Buddhist monks would do their thing to satisfy their desires. And okay, so next, alcohol. Oh, alcohol. It was not very. It was a lighter form of going against the precepts. So it was. They didn't openly say I drink, but they would secretly drink, and people know, like peasants would know, like people, locals of the temple know that they drink. But it's okay, it's just alcohol. It's not that bad. And then going to food, meals. So all they can eat are leaves, right? Are leaves and soy, and they because again they used to be samurai, and they used to be farmers who ate meat, who lived free lives. Well, in terms of have to paying taxes, they're not free, but otherwise they were free. They could choose whatever they wanted to eat, but now they can't. So now it's a trade-off, right? They don't have to pay tax, but now they can't eat meat. So they were pretty strict about it. So most temples were strict about it. So they had to invent a way to satisfy their desires of eating meat. So it's not like they were able to enlighten themselves and conquer the desire. They're supposed to conquer the desire towards all these attractions, but they couldn't. So to keep them afloat, they're mentally afloat, they created Shojin Ryori, which is like they grind soy and then make it into balls so that it looks like meatballs, and it's juicy because they are dipped in dashi, in broth soup. So you can feel that sensation of the juice of the meat running into your mouth and running on your tongues. That's Shojin Ryori, right? So that's how Shojin Ryori came about. If that answers the question, it was pretty long.
Oh my god, that was a very juicy explanation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Especially, I didn't know that the Buddhist monks, they have become monks just because of tax evasion. But that was very interesting.
That's the main motive.
Yeah, can you? I'm sorry. Maybe you might have said this. Where have you learned all this? It's not like okay, this is how like a shojin really come about, right? You must do a lot of reading. Where'd you get all this information?
Through reading, through reading a lot.
Bunch of the books.
Yeah, it's a bunch of books. Yes. So my room, I wrote in my book, in my what do you call it? The afterword in my book, that my room is a big mess right now as I speak. So a clubhouse is a great medium because you have to show off your room. But my room is full of books. They're not even sorted in any order. They're piled up. I have like 6 piles of books that didn't fit into my bookshelf. It's a lot of reading. But what helped me do this, of course, it's not my own doing. I really understand that this is not from solely my own doing. It's thanks to people on Instagram and LinkedIn kind of wanting more, right? And then they tell me through comments and likes, that they want more of this. It's really interesting. It's enlightening. I want more. I want to learn more, and that's why I read more. And I've been they've been pushing myself. They've been pushing me to read on for the last 3 years, and thanks to that, I can bring these stories to you today. So yeah, that's the story behind this.
Okay, I'm sure Tim and Maya had a bunch of questions, but my last question, if I can. So your audience, are they all non-Japanese, predominantly? Most of them. Okay.
That's right. But there are some people who there are very few actually, Japanese locals who because I post in English. That's probably a great part of the reason. But the most of the comments I see are from all over the world, and I can see from the stats of my book sales that they are evenly distributed among English-speaking countries and also Europe.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, for letting us know. So I also shared the link to your podcast here in the top of the room, also in the room chat. So for everybody who is interested, please go there and listen to the episodes. Also, if you're not connected to Kyoto on LinkedIn, please do that, because he shares his stories there as well, and that's how we actually found him, through LinkedIn and his stories there.
I just sent a connection request, Kyota.
Oh, thank you very much. Right. Yeah, and like the book I wrote, Folk Tales of Japan. It basically follows the format of my post and the talk I gave here. It's the hook is 28 folk tales, but each folk tale is coupled with the kind of talk that I gave to you today. The talk I gave you to today is new, so it's not in the book, but there are 28 episodes that, or stories or cultural explanation that would help us appreciate not just Japanese culture, but society in general, like the world society in general. It's not just Japan. I said, a good part of Japanese culture, a good foundation of Japanese culture that I could say is good intentions, but I think it applies to all cultures. All cultures. We are living in whatever we see in the culture we live today. It survived because there were good intentions, and they cannot survive without good intentions. So I feel that's why people resonate. Even so, there are many people who have never even visited Japan. They're interested. They've never visited, but they feel akin to the ideas discussed in the book. They feel it's relevant to themselves for some reason. So I think that's another beautiful thing about sharing culture. You read about a story, you hear about a story that happened in a culture you have never even been to, but you resonate with the protagonist of that story, of a culture that you have never visited. But that is proof that we live in one world, and we can understand, we can appreciate each other, we can appreciate each other's cultures, and I think that's a beautiful thought, and that keeps me going in sharing all these things.
And where can we find? Sorry, Yuka. Just please keep your question. And where can we find your book, Kyota?
Oh, on Amazon. On Amazon. I wish I can post a link. Let's see.
You can post a link in the room chat.
Okay, I'll post a link. Yes. While I answer, I'll listen to Yuka's question.
Sorry, you. I'm sure you can multitask. No, I was just gonna say, I was going through the title or topics of your podcast, and I happened on the summary. It was the father of Japanese goldfish. That's a intriguing titles, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start with this topic, this episode.
Yes. Right. So those podcasts are actually pretty old. It's like a year. The last one I made was like a year and a half ago. But yeah, it's so those are earlier versions of the storytelling I do right now, and if I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But yes, Goldfish. I won't give it away. I'll have you listen to it. But yeah, Goldfish were of Japan. Basically, were made by samurai. So that will change how you see goldfish the next time you go to Sumida Aquarium, where they display a beautiful display of goldfish. So I hope you enjoy that topic.
I'm sure that, yes, it's entertaining, and that's the best way. We have sometimes we talk with Tim about when we talk about Japanese culture, and we always share, that thought that if you want to actually make people understand the culture or believe in something difficult or just help them understand it, you need to entertain them and help them understand them through some humor or different way of entertaining them. I can see that you have done that in your book. You do this in also in your stories on LinkedIn, which is amazing, and also with some other people we have had here as guests on Clubhouse. We also say or talk that it's really difficult to find more native Japanese people who can do that, and we appreciate your being here because it's so much more resonating when we have a Japanese person talk about these things. Because you said that you also went through that difficult period of, let's say,
right,
finding the reason behind everything.
Right.
So thank you very much for doing this, and I cannot just say how grateful I feel that you have been doing this. And yes, I believe that a lot of other people are on the same wave, and they need, to make make these things work for them and go through the same process. So yeah, if we can help together doing that, it will be really great. And I can see, I mean, there are a lot of people in the room right now. If anybody has comments or questions, just let us know and we'll bring you up here with us. I can also see another great person, author here author on Japan and Japanese culture, Kiyoshi Matsumoto. Thank you so very much for joining us this morning. You have also a book. Kiyoshi's book is Unmasked Japan, and it's another recommended book to read if you want to understand Japan and its culture and its people. So, yeah.
Actually, for this clubhouse.
Yeah, one of the things that I found really interesting, Kyoto, I mean, you kind of shed light on some blind spots that I've had. Maya and I often discuss that we know, there's basically two types of non-Japanese who live here. Those who we didn't use your words, but basically we're saying the ones who live in hellish Japan and the ones who live in heavenly Japan. And we've often wondered why, like I'm in heavenly Japan, so is Maya. And, we've gone back and forth on why are we living in the same country and having having completely opposite points of view.
Yes, thank you for that comment, Tim. So yes, we often talk about this, and I have also talked about that with other people. Who are in our community. Yes, it probably takes certain kind of personality, and
Came to work in Japan as English.
Yes, indeed. So to actually, have that willingness to get beyond the face of things, or beyond the surface of all things that we encounter here, and really try to make to make sense, but not just to make sense, but to understand it, and also get other people on the same wave. And so I wonder, Kyoto, whether you have, let's say, an insight about the difference between these two types of people, or these two types of personalities. What makes or what made you actually really want to scratch deeper and find the reason behind everything? I know you mentioned that you went through a difficult period, and that something actually happened and made you want to get out of that. But if you try to analyze that, what is that really? The personal trait you have that helped you get beyond, the struggle.
No, I think now that I think about it, I think it has more to do with who you meet. For example, if you're a non-Japanese national living in Japan now, it has a lot to do with who you happen to meet during your stay. So the reason I think that is because I wouldn't have been able to I wouldn't call myself an expert yet, but I wouldn't have been able to understand or appreciate Japanese culture this much if it wasn't for the first book I picked up on Japanese culture, Japanese cuisine. I started with food and wine, and the author, he lived like 30 years ago. He's dead now, but he was not the greatest type of storyteller, but he was a good storyteller, and I was able to finally understand, understanding is that aha moment is key to digging deeper. You think, oh no, I understand this, right? And then you want to see if you can understand even more. So my luckily meeting up with or hooking up with this book that I just happened to pick up at Maruzen, at a bookstore in Japan. That's the key. That's what made me stand here today. So it's that person who wanted to explain so that people can understand, and they managed to explain in a way that people can understand. Then I started looking for more books by him, and then if I start to try to see if there are other authors who can explain as well as him, or even better. And then I started finding authors who do that. And it's I go into that cycle. I went into that cycle. But if it wasn't for that first person that I met, the first book that I met, I wouldn't have gone there. So I think one thing is, so I was saying I worked at an English language school and for like 10 years. So I had many colleagues who are non-Japanese nationals, and they were saying that, so some of them, learn the language, learn Japanese, and they try to settle down here. And some of them, they felt, maybe I'm not going to do that. I enjoy Japan, but I think I'm going to stay for like 2 or 3 years and then move on. So the latter type of people tended to enclose themselves in what they themselves call like an English bubble. So in Japan, most people don't speak English fluently, but they're nice. They're nice or hospitable to foreign people. So you can totally live life without speaking a word of Japanese, and live comfortably without speaking a word of Japanese. And there are English-speaking communities, especially in Tokyo. There are many, what is it called, like the American Club, or there are clubs like that. And you can easily find communities that you can befriend yourself with, and live comfortably again. So again, you don't have to meet, but being in that English bubble, you don't meet a lot of people. You meet people with like-minded people who are here to stay as an expat for a few years and then move on, and that's okay. But if you are to settle in Japan, and so to increase your chance of meeting with that person who will get you through the door, and who will help you not necessarily explain Japanese culture, but who will help you appreciate Japanese culture or Japanese life. If you're lucky to meet that person, then you're on the right track, and you will be on the right track, and you will settle down happily in Japan, I think. I think the key is to increase your chance to meet these people. Just keep looking, hungrily, and you'll probably run into one day. So
yeah, Kyota, what you just said is exactly what happened to me.
okay.
I just met the right people, but also, as you implied, I think you have to have a little bit of an adventurous spirit. And when I came to Japan, I was in the Navy. I worked with guys who never left the base for 2.5 years because they had everything they needed. So it's not just an English bubble, it's the base. That's their bubble, right? And my friend and I said, no, we're moving off. We want to make friends locally. So it was that mindset of wanting to look for the people. And then, as you said, that increases your chance of meeting more people, and hopefully the right people who are your gateway into Japan. And so that was, like, for me, the first thing. I also feel like it's a little bit easier for non-Japanese who live here than for many Japanese, because they don't, rightly or wrongly, they're much kinder to us. They're more patient with us, and they don't get as offended if we don't follow all the rules, because they don't really expect us to. There's a lower bar. But if they see we're trying, we get extra brownie points. And there's a double-edged sword, because sometimes you keep making the same mistake because they never tell you. They're just being nice, right?
Right.
But I think when a foreigner first comes here, and you embrace the experience, you go through like a honeymoon period, because everybody's so nice to you, and they're telling you how great your Japanese is because you know how to say arigato, right? And then I think some people descend into hell for a little bit when the reality hits, And one reason I saw with many non-Japanese is they realize I'll never be completely accepted as a foreigner because I'm not Japanese. And I went through that. But then I had this change of heart, and I said, you know what? I don't think I want to be completely accepted, because then I have to follow all their rules. I have to live in their pressure cooker with them.
Right.
And I kind of concluded, one, it's really tough being Japanese. And two, it's, if you choose, you can live a really nice life in Japan as a foreigner. And there's minuses. Of course, there's minuses. But as I've said many times here, the pluses to me far outweigh it. I think I love it. I love living here now. So like you, I graduated from that. Maybe I didn't go to hellish Japan. Maybe it was limbo Japan. But, I went through that phase. So I completely get it. And back to your point, though, I was very lucky, the people I met.
See, Timothy, if I can I know we're hitting a 1 hour mark, but just to throw in my 2 cents, I'm like I was listening to you, and then you said it's tough to be a Japanese, and then I totally get that. But because I'm a Japanese, but that's why I think it's what Kyoto said. I'm sorry, Kyoto said. Just to there is two sides to Japan: the hellish and the heavenly Japan. And I thought at first I thought, did he use the hellish, the term hell? But then I got that, that's a very great way to contrast, two sides to any culture. So I thought, okay. And I never really realized I may be bound by ritual, because that's what the rituals are, right? They bind you without you even realize you are bound by them. So, and I thought that, maybe you said you sort of embrace them, but, you have learned to free from them. And I thought it's a great term. If you don't, patent the term, I may use that, heavenly and hellish Japan. But thank you so much for sharing that, today's, story with us.
Thank you for all those questions and comments. It really served as a springboard for finding out that I can talk about these topics. It's a realization, self-realization for me that I can actually talk about these topics when I get asked on the spot. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyoto, for being with us today. It's 3 minutes past 9 o'clock, so we'll need to let you go today, but we're going to continue this conversation in the future, I'm sure. And, thank you to everybody who joined us. Please keep in mind that if you live in a foreign culture, or it could be Japan, of course, but in any other foreign culture, you need to be open-minded. You need to be adventurous. Even though you're bound by rituals, there is a way to get beyond, and there is a way to learn and enjoy the place you are in, even though you don't get it in the very first couple of days or months. So, Kyoto, this is all for today. We're going to continue this later. So, that's all. I wish everybody a great day and a successful remainder of the week, and we're looking forward to having you again next week. Thank you. Bye. Thank you for tuning in today. We will be on air next week on Wednesday at 8 a.m. Japan time again, so join us. Until then, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming events, follow us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Again, we are looking forward to your joining us next week. Until then, stay well and make the best of the day. See you!